This program has been approved for one IDCEC CEU. To receive credit for this program, please submit your full name, IDCEC number, program class code, and your summary essay to ceu@iida.org. The program class code is located alongside the title of this program on the IIDA Academy page. For a certificate of completion to use toward another certifying body, please submit the same information to ceu@iida.org. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kendra Locklear-Ordia, and I'm honored to be hosting this panel today with three colleagues and educators who I admire very much. I'm an assistant professor of interior design at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And I'd like to welcome our first panelist, Milagros Zigoni. Philip, to the screen. Milagros is an associate professor and director of School of Interior Architecture, and also the director of diversity relations at the College of Architecture and Design at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Welcome, Milagros.
Thank you, Kendra. Happy to.
Thank you. And next, I'd like to invite Dr. Angelita Scott. Dr. Scott is the director of the Community Concept and Health Equity Lead at the International Well-Building Institute. Thanks for being here today, Angie.
Thank you.
And last but not least, I'd like to invite Igor Siddiqui to join us. And Igor is an associate professor at the University of Texas in Austin at the School of Architecture there. So welcome and thank you for all joining today.
Thank you, Kendra.
So we all had some great kind of warm-up time to get some conversations started. So I'm looking forward to continuing that with the rest of our audience here today. So we'll jump right in and I will let whoever kind of wants to start with answering this first question go. So obviously we know we're all here today kind of discussing aspects of learning and education as it relates to the design field. So in what ways has the emphasis on interdisciplinary collaboration evolved within design education? How might this trend continue to evolve in the coming years?
I can go. I think that as the technology and the new frontiers evolve, we need to collaborate with others. And the way that we have been doing it is we have a faculty member who is working, for example, with plant sciences, one that is working with psychology. And we are trying to start to integrate these collaborations within studios so that the studios have the designers and the non-designers together as a means to also help our students understand what is the role of a designer in a cross-disciplinary environment.
Yeah, so maybe I'll continue since we are coming from similar institutions, similar schools of architecture. Of course, interdisciplinarity is nothing new. Designers have always collaborated with others. For architects since at least the Renaissance, when architects started drawing as opposed to building buildings. And design disciplines have always, in one way or another, engaged knowledge outside of their core expertise, whether it's through collaboration with others or even through notions of expanded practice, right? Where one can practice within their kind of the core expertise. And at the University of Texas at Austin at the School of Architecture, as you know, Kendra, as a graduate of the school really encompasses a whole range of design disciplines that cover the kind of the gradient of the built environment from room to region. I think what's changing is a sense of priority. So in other words, what is foregrounded, what kind of knowledge is foregrounded, and what maybe becomes less of a priority. And so, for example, as a professor of design, some of those priorities over the last few years have been thinking about non-human life in our ecosystem. So we're spending a lot of time thinking about plants and animals and other non-human species. Health and ecology are, a part of our university strategic plan. So it's not even a design question. It's just a kind of a general question. And then climate and global warming are also irreversibly at the center of design discourse. And this is really causing a shift in terms of who we want to collaborate with and whose knowledge we really need. And I think that this shift has also brought into the foreground interests and concerns that I think interior designers have always been really good at. And this is presenting new opportunities for interiors to really lead collaborations. So, I'll end there maybe.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I know that interior design has always been an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary profession. By nature, we deal with people at the center of what we do. Therefore, we are going to interact with people from across different sectors, across different types of backgrounds, and understanding at the core of who people are, the activities that they do is a necessity in our body of knowledge. And so, the programs that I've taught in and the programs that I have been, that I was in as a student, have both been interdisciplinary programs where we were housed in the School of Human Ecology, where there were multiple disciplines within those schools, as well as the one that I taught in as an assistant professor. There was fashion design, interior design, there was nutrition, so it really opens us up, I think, to really get to the heart of what we do. And what we are truly great at is connecting people with the environment.
Really like all those responses. I think it's nice to see the thread again from different backgrounds and experiences and understand, like you said, Igor, that it's this kind of shift in priority, but still with that common thread of like human health, ecological health, and environmental health, and thinking about how that expands maybe those traditional transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary roles that have been in place in education and college systems as well. So that's exciting. And I think that leads nicely into our kind of next question as we think about how some of these shifts we've observed in pedagogical approaches, whether that's kind of bringing up or ramping up this aspect of interdisciplinary used in design education, particularly in response again to students' expectations and learning styles. So if someone wants to jump in and answer that first, appreciate it.
I've been teaching for 3 years now, so you other two professors on the line here may be better to answer this question, but I do, from what I have seen and what I've experienced when I was teaching over that 6 years time, students were starting to expect more in understanding the social aspect of design, understanding, really looking at theory, understanding how we create items, the design process, and how that all intersects with understanding people and the psychological and even physiological aspects of design and how it can impact our projects.
And maybe I'll just add to my own perspective on expectations. I think student expectations in many ways mirror kind of expectations that we all collectively have as a society. And one of the observations would be that in general, there is a kind of gap between a kind of a desire for certainty in terms of what you should know, in terms of what tools you should use, which path you should take, and then the very reality of a world which is in flux, where such certainty is really hard, if not impossible, to find. And that actually that friction is at this very moment is a really interesting place to be. I think in our program, we try to emphasize adaptability as a mindset, which can be both thrilling and uncomfortable. Discomfort is not anyone's expectation, but it's a part of learning and kind of engaging with others and being in an unfamiliar territory. So this question of how to deal with discomfort in an age where there is so much focus on comfort is something that I think we all talk about a lot and really, need to find more ways to think about.
And I would like to take on what you just said, Igor, with this notion of discomfort and looking at the expectations that, in general, many of the students at the very beginning feel attracted to the program because they are interested in the aesthetics of creating spatial experiences. But how do we push the ethical role of the profession beyond just the spatial experience, right? For instance, I mentioned before that there is a professor working in a cross-disciplinary team with plants and scientists, and this professor is working in refugee camps in Jordan, and the students need to work on a studio project that is about how do you better the life of someone that is a refugee, that is so foreign to the typical traditional studio that it forces them to deal with the uncomfort. But also I think that there is this notion of making students be adaptable and flexible. It goes back to us as educators. Very often I am in a room where, there is this perception like, when I was a student, I used to be blah, blah, blah. And somehow we expect our students to have and to have the same ethical work and our commitment and everything else that we had when we were students. But the truth is, like, we were students long time ago where the complexities of the world really changed, where the amount of unknowns are much more today, where we're just coming from a pandemic, right? Where many of our students have to work in order to be able to study. And somehow we have the expectation that they will all be full-time students because if they are committed to their education, they should only focus on that. And sometimes we also need to kind of adjust our expectations and be flexible and nimble and adaptable to the world that is in front of us, that it is totally different than the world that we had when we were students.
Completely agreed.
Yeah, and I think, again, in just thinking about student expectations, at least that I see in my own classroom too, it's very much about the value that they see themselves too bringing to a project when they graduate. And like Angie said, kind of that aspect of like that social value, that ethical value, the empathy value, and how they expect to learn about that and how that becomes kind of an integral part to them as a designer in the process. And talking about kind of shifting perceptions of, education and delivery, wouldn't be on a panel without a COVID question. So how did the COVID-19 pandemic influence the delivery and accessibility of design education? And what lessons can be learned from this period for either future models of either remote or hybrid learning? And I'm going to throw this one to Igor, because I think on our little chat on Wednesday, you had a really insightful perspective on this.
Sure. I think just in a very specific way, I think remote and hybrid learning that we learned how to do. I would say that if we had this conversation in 2019, the same people that were in Milagros's room that say, when I was a student, they would also be the ones to say, like, you cannot teach a studio, on the screen. And we know now, a few years later, that this actually works really well. And so for our program specifically, these kind of new media really have increased access to participation and collaboration beyond our geographic limitations. We're able to offer studios by practitioners that there is no way that they're going to spend a whole semester in Central Texas away from their busy practices elsewhere. We're able to do just so much more in terms of sharing knowledge, making connections, and being a part of a community that's not kind of constrained by geography. So that's just one way.
And it's funny because Cristia Bravo, that now is an assistant professor with Igor, she taught online for me when she was working in Gensler. So, but I also think that there is an opportunity because of COVID, or what COVID kind of forced us to test, to start collaborating with others in a different way. So we are leveraging what we learned through teaching through the pandemic, and every semester we are having a studio that is a collaborative studio with the students in another university in another part of the world. And we have done this with Argentina, we have done it with Romania, we have done it with Korea, that at some point in my country, there is an expression that if Mahoma doesn't go to the mountain, the mountain goes to Mahoma. And somehow when students cannot travel for whatever reason, financial barriers, having to take care of their parents, health issues, we're still enabling them to be in a learning environment that is different from the environment that they are used to when the teammate in the project is someone that is in a different country with a different language, with a different culture, right? And it was super fascinating to see how our students at UT were able to then start to make the comparison between one culture and the other one, when they need to be on time and when they were supposed to arrive 20 minutes late, and how to really become determined when you're explaining someone to your part of the project to someone that may be much more strong-headed. So I think that this is allowing our students to develop themselves in their full capacity because of COVID happened. It was this, let's put the world into a social experiment and see what comes from that.
Yeah, and I think
so it also shed a light on student well-being. That's one thing that I think had started to be more attention had been paid attention to it. And it's something that I struggled with a lot when I was teaching, was how can we really support students' well-being, understanding how rigorous, and I don't think a lot of people understand how rigorous interior design programs are, with the lack of sleep, with the demand of doing the projects, being in studio all the time, really stretching their minds in ways that students may not have ever imagined. COVID made us all pause as a society in general. And I think as a professor teaching interior design during that time, I really wanted to make sure that my students were okay. I really wanted to make sure that they had what they needed, not only in terms of psychological and physical well-being, but also financial well-being. You know, we still had to go to school, we still had to produce projects, but many students didn't have the technology to do so during that time. And so how can we create ways to get them the hardware, the software that they needed to be able to continue on with school? And it shed a really important light on that in creating more equity within our programs for students who were already struggling, but it really amplified that during that time.
So I think that is all great feedback. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about technology, which I know is always kind of at the forefront of everyone's mind when we're thinking about learning and education and how those get integrated into the classroom. And Milagros, I'll have you answer this first question. It says, with the rapid pace of technological change, how do you see the role of foundational design principles and traditional skills evolving within design curricula?
Well, I think that they are the foundation to develop the designer and any kind of human, right? It's there is a part that we need to understand what we bring to the table before we can rely on any kind of tools, from Revit, Adobe, AI, you name it. I think that it's super important to understand the value that we bring. That it kind of, I link it a little bit back to the previous question with COVID. When COVID hit, everyone went into the design and the arts, right? The arts because they were bored and stuck at home and they wanted to see and to be less stressed about what was going on. And to design because we were the ones implementing how to deliver food and how to move nurses in a hospital and how to plan to come back to campus in a healthy way. And at some point that forces us to, in retrospect, to really say, this is what we bring to the table to the world. This is why design matters. And this is why we are important in the conversations. very often I complain to my friends who are in computer science or in health that the beginning salary in their field is 5 times the salary of our students. And I think that it's because we don't see the value in what we do. And I think that the same goes to the foundational piece of that our students need to understand. It's understanding our own value as humans, the ethical role of the profession, understanding that at the end of the day, as Angelita said before, our responsibility is to humans, is to other people, right? And I think that we need to understand that very well to then use the technology and the tools.
So maybe I'll jump in, and I will kind of maybe expand upon that. We just said that 100% you can do an online studio, and there's a big but to it, which is that these things don't kind of exclude each other. It's not sort of like, we used to teach studios in one way and now we're doing it in another way because we have a new technology available. I think one of the things sort of in post-pandemic, in the post-pandemic world, one of the things that it became really obvious to us at UTN in our program was that we needed to re-engage physically, like that we had to remind ourselves and each other that we still have our bodies, and that within this kind of foundational thinking in spatial design, being able to orient yourself in space physically is something that is actually quite unique to our disciplines. And that this is a body of knowledge that, we will continue to re-engage regardless of what other technology is available. And in some ways, I think as COVID had showed us, learning how to design for bodies in physical space has never been more relevant. So, I think that good design pedagogy is always evolving in order to somehow define unique and enduring disciplinary skill sets, and connecting those skill sets to larger sets of emerging demands and movements. And so, and I think sometimes we think of foundations as the first thing that students learn, but I think what's foundational instead is a kind of ethos that runs through one's entire education and practice. And I think what we really bring to the table is this kind of expertise of how to be in the physical world. That's one of the strands that I think is really worth continuing to cultivate and acknowledge and develop, regardless of what technological changes kind of happen parallel to it.
So the next question was one of our hot topic discussions prior to the rest of our audience joining. And it has to do with AI, which I know is, again, at the forefront of a lot of practitioners and educators and students' minds. And Igor, I'm going to throw this one back to you because I know that UT last year had the After AI symposium. And so they've done a lot of kind of work and discussions around this as well. So how has the integration of technologies such as AI and virtual reality impacted the design education landscape in the last 5 years? And what do you anticipate or see for the future with it?
So these technologies, I would say that our program has been kind of developing the kind of digital and technological repertoire for like the last 30 years, maybe longer, maybe since the 80s, with different kind of bursts of activity. I think this last 12 months of kind of the mainstreaming of AI tools has finally, I think, made everyone, regardless of kind of preference or interest, made aware that these technologies are neither advanced or optional. Sometimes we call our studios as advanced studios or optional studios. These technologies are ubiquitous and they're a part of ordinary contemporary landscape. We all get to deal with them. But I think that engaging them in constructive ways as designers, beyond simple consumption, but to actually think about them constructively, requires both patience and practice, and this is where I think, to faculty or colleagues who think that it's up to students to decide how they want to engage tools, I disagree. I think we really all collectively need to learn how to engage that. so that those engagements can be more meaningful. And I think for me, and I think for the program, it's really important to always position the student, and hopefully in the future, the designer, the practitioner, the next generation academic, to situate us vis-a-vis technology as producers as opposed to consumers, you know. And I think that this requires like sustained engagement, right? That it's one thing to kind of log into Discord to kind of use Midjourney for a project. It's another thing to cultivate a kind of culture of curiosity and collaboration where you feel like you're a part of that technological development. You know, when we started using Rhino 20 years ago, like we were all a part of using listservs and, you know, posting little videos online so others can learn from that. And I think if we're serious about these technologies and being a part of them, I think we need to recognize our agency in their development. So that's some of the things that we're experimenting with here at UT. I think with digital technology more broadly, we've been doing it for quite some time. But yeah, I would say that the kind of the higher level objective would be to kind of see ourselves as producers and not consumers of those technologies.
And I will go back almost to the previous question with the value of foundations. I think that we need to look at AI as another tool, the same way that we look at the first time to Rhino and Autodesk or AutoCAD back in the days, and then Revit, right? Which means that they become a tool to help us do better our job. They don't replace our job. And I think that in order to do that, we go back to this notion of how do we prepare ethical humans that they respond to the needs of other humans. That's what differentiates us from the machine. And I think that that's the part that will make us always relevant. I think that the risk falls when we teach to the tool instead of teach to the designer, because when the tool becomes obsolete, so becomes the one that is all about the tool. And I think that at some point it's important to take the risk of trying it, right? I have this approach, like I prefer to ask for forgiveness than for permission. And with that, it's like, okay, we don't know what else AI will be able to do within the next 2 or 3 years, but I think that we need to at least have some studios where we are testing what the profession can do with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
What the education can do with that. For instance, in our school at the other UT in Tennessee, we have one student third year that for the last 2 semesters has been an AI studio, where the faculty almost is learning with the students, right? Or he's taking the summer to really advance with that, but saying, for those who are interested in learning more about how this tool can help you become a better designer, there is this option. It doesn't mean that all the studios are going to be having a component of AI, but I think that we cannot fight it.
Yeah, Kendra, these are such good questions. I just wanted to add one more thing as I was kind of writing notes and kind of reflecting on what we're doing here kind of collectively. You know, I wonder if there's been so much conversation about kind of replacing one with the other, and this kind of fear of technology replacing humans, and this kind of anxiety about labor, which is all justified and you know, rightly so. I would just like to add that maybe a part of what we're doing now, or we could be doing, is kind of imagining new modes of collaborations with machines as our equals, rather than thinking of machines as kind of subservient to humans, you know. And I think that I've been really encouraged recently seeing colleagues produce work where they will acknowledge the role of AI as a collaborator. But I think as a part of that reflection, also doing a better job acknowledging everyone else who is human who is involved in that process, and so I think even just by sort of like reading like credits, like who designed this poster, it was this person and that person in collaboration with Midjourney. And all of a sudden it's kind of reordering who we are. So it's a student that worked with faculty and AI. And so I find that super, super encouraging. And I wonder if maybe for a moment, pausing this kind of humorous, human-centered perspective might allow us to imagine other ways of collaborating with technology, and that might extend to other non-human species as well. So I'm really encouraged by this kind of more expanded definition of what is collaboration.
Angie, I'm curious, how's this conversation around AI or virtual reality and kind of technology in general being discussed at IWBI?
It is something that we are not running away from. It's something that we are wanting to explore more, how it can enhance the real estate industry, the design industry. We're really in the stage right now, like everybody else, just asking questions. What is this tool? How can we use it? How can it not be abused in its use? And creating some type of guidelines around its use. So I think just like everyone else, we're trying to embrace it for what it can be, for the many different possibilities that can come out of using it, and just making sure that it's something that we have as much of a handle on as we can, still remaining curious. And still allowing our employees to use it, understanding it in those ways.
And Angie, again, given your role, I'm going to throw this next question to you too. In the context of sustainability and ethical design practices, what changes have been made in design education, and how can these be expanded upon in the next 5 years to address other pressing global issues?
I'm really excited. I know I keep harping on social design, but that's my thing. I have always really been very interested and understood the importance of the social aspect of design and the power that we have as designers in that area. And so I'm just really excited that the profession as a whole is embracing that. I am excited that that society is embracing that, really looking at things like equity, health equity, racial equity, gender equity, looking at regenerative design. How can we explore that, and kind of what to Igor is saying, how can we look beyond human beings, but look at other beings and organisms, and how can we make sure that they are protected and considered as we are designing, and as we are producing, and as we are, I guess, kind of going through the life cycle of the different products that we use and processes that we use. So it's a really exciting time. I think it also opens up different pathways for us as interior designers, interior design professionals, but then as well as for students, understanding that there are different pathways that they can go into that are becoming more mainstream and are being taught in a more mainstream way in interior design. What I have seen in some aspects of this is that interior design educators are really exploring how to teach these different ways of knowing, how to really create more empathy and understanding within their curriculum and for their students as they are designing. And it's just a really exciting time, and I'm happy to see that evolution.
And I will echo Angelica's words, and I see the design for the public good, right? My question towards the students all the time is like, how do we do good to the public, right? What does it mean? Which is sometimes it put us in crisis with almost all the awards criteria, because almost all the awards criteria, when you look at it, they are all based in aesthetics. And, you know, we continue to be to award and recognize projects from the aesthetics point of view, which is great, don't get me wrong, aesthetics is also very important, but I think that is this notion like, how can we use design as a tool to develop social agency, to develop a catalyst for change, to develop equitable experiences, right? And we are doing that. I mean, that has been my own agenda. It's very similar to Angelita's. So this notion of the design for justice. And for the last 19 years, I have been leveraging design education to empower underserved communities. So this notion of how do we, you know, we have the privilege, or our students have the privilege of having a design education. How can we take that privilege and use that as a tool to help in those communities to rediscover themselves, or to help them develop the change that they want to do, that because they don't have the resources or the tools, nor they can afford it, they are stuck in a particular place. And I think we start to see a lot of placemaking, placekeeping, right? These ideas that started in urban planning, that now they are totally at the intersection many times with what interiors do, right? Because as we said many times, we work with people.
Yeah, and I just want to shed a light, also just mention that this is really creating more understanding for evidence-based design and research when it comes to design, and how important that is as we are exploring different social avenues and different aspects of people's lives. The importance of really understanding the research and the data behind that to make informed decisions about the design decisions in our projects.
I think a little bit along those same lines, as we're thinking about aspects of equity, is thinking about how design educators adapting to the increasing demands for diversity and inclusion within the design field are addressing this within kind of the classroom, and what strategies can be employed to further promote these aspects in education. And Milagros, I'll ask you to answer this first, given your role as Director of Diversity at UT.
Well, I think it's a very interesting question. The other day I was talking to a Black student and I told her, tell me what we're doing wrong, right? And she basically said, well, it's both ways. She was saying that her parents, for example, didn't want her to go into the design discipline because they didn't see the similar value as if she would have been in business or in engineering or anything like that. And she was like, there's something that also needs to shift on my side too. But I think that as educators, part of our problem is like we don't understand that sometimes the students from underserved communities self-select out before the age of 12, right? It's like, unfortunately, a K through 12 education has kind of made the thing like, if we are not good at something, it's the definition of what we should never do instead of what we should aspire to become better. But also they don't have someone that looks like them or that sounds like them that they can see and say, oh, I want to be like this person, right? And to me, this notion of representation goes hand in hand with the notion of exposure. How do we expose underrepresented populations to design? For the last 19 years, I have been working with these underserved communities, most of the time with Title I schools. Title I schools was where the schools, 75% of the kids qualify for free or reduced lunch. And I typically work with kids between ages 9 and 11. And when you ask them, do you know anyone that is in your life that does any of the design disciplines, landscape architecture, interior design, industrial design, architecture, graphic design, they haven't been exposed to the field. They don't know that they are experiencing the field every day in their classroom with the objects that they touch, when they play in the playground. And I think that it's our role to as educators to go back to this younger population and show them that they can be the ones designing the environments and the objects and the experiences for other people. And I think that is the lack of exposure.
Yeah, I agree with Milagros, and as in my role as director of interior design, we have both graduate programs in interiors and an undergraduate program. So I think of it in terms of recruitment, of course, because that's one of the tangible ways to think about how to shape who's a part of the program and who gets to be here. I think for a graduate program, you know, it's almost a little bit easier because we have undergraduates already on campus, and so they get to see what a graduate program in interior design looks like. And you can imagine that it creates this kind of aspiration because it's really exciting, and it's this field that goes beyond what most undergraduate students would think is interior design. And one of the ways that we have implemented kind of expanding, I mean, our programs are insanely competitive as far as admissions process goes. Our graduate cohort is up to 15 students a year, so it's not a lot. And also at the undergraduate level, it's the School of Architecture has the most competitive admission standards on campus. And interior design is a part of that cohort. So it's really, really hard to get in. But one of the things that we've done is we've created an interior design minor degree that allows students who are not interior design majors to take our courses. And this has been one of the ways that they have been able to enter the field. And I have to say, most of the time, because they already went here undergrad, they want to go somewhere else to grad school. So they've gone on to RISD and Parsons and other places. But the point is that, you know, some doors opened here and they were able to enter the field and be in it in a way that they wouldn't have been able to be in otherwise. You know, at the undergraduate level, I think connections to kind of K through 12 education is so important. I feel like as faculty, we have kind of engaged through our work and through our funded research, some of this outreach through installation projects that we've done. I did a museum project that is kind of a 5-year project that engages K through 12 students in the region on a weekly basis. But it's also a part of the aspiration. You know, I think COVID killed our kind of summer architecture and design academy, which was for high school students. It's something that we talk about a lot. And while, you know, many students know what architecture might look like, it may not be the same for interior design. So that's really work that we have cut out for us. And so, yeah, this last part is sort of an aspiration and the kind of a to-do list. But it seems like kind of engaging future populations is really, really important.
I think also we need to consider what happens when we do begin to have more diverse populations within our student body. How do we retain those students? Do they feel a sense of belonging when they're inside of the program? We are starting to see more people of color entering into design programs, and that's wonderful to see. But we still are often seeing maybe 1 or 2 people of color within programs. And do they feel a sense of security? Do they feel a sense of safety and belonging? Do they see themselves represented in the projects that we are asking them to do? Are we adjusting our curriculum to speak to issues that may be important with them and their families and the ways that they have lived and continue to live? So that's something that we need to also think about as we are to diversify and as we should be diversifying our programs and our profession. Many times people drop out of the profession who are people of color within the first 3 years because they don't have that sense of connectedness. So that's something that we have to think about as well.
Those are all really great points. And I think, again, it's not a new concept, but we know that it's a pipeline system, like from our K through 12 through our academic institutions, to have a more diverse profession ultimately as well. I want to remind the audience that we'll start the Q&A session in just a moment, so you can use the Q&A function on Zoom to enter those in. And then I will wrap up with our last kind of official prepared question with the panel, and that's, what excites you about what lies ahead for design educators and the design community at large? Igor, you want to start?
Sure. Over the last 10 years at the University of Texas at Austin, we have developed a graduate program in interior design. Many of our graduates, including you, Kendra, are teaching at other universities now. We're really building a critical mass of thinkers in our field that is really kind of game-changing. And so I'm really excited about thinking of pedagogy as practice. Pedagogy is practice. We all contribute to that field. I get really excited about our students and future graduates continuing to challenge and transform professional practice, which is already a great place to be, but to challenge it to be even more responsible, more accountable, and more imaginative. And through that, to help construct a world that they prefer over the one that they're inheriting. You know, I think that that's really worth continuing to work on and worth living for.
I get excited, AC, so I have to make sure that I explain it the right way. When I refer to my school very often, I call them my one community of learners, right? I see the faculty, the students, the staff, the profession, the stakeholders as partners in this notion that is creating the next generation of designers. And I am excited about the collaborations and the partnerships to do this. I have been in UT for 2.5 years before I was in ASU, and in these 2.5 years, I can see, for example, how much we have evolved the global competency with these projects that these studios that we are doing with other universities around the world. We are traveling with students to a different country with a graduating class every spring. We are bringing a visiting professor. Our inaugural professor is gonna finish his term in December. We brought him from Chile. Again, this notion, like, if a student cannot afford to travel abroad, how I can bring a faculty from another place that can really expose them to a different way of learning, like it could be in the case of Chile. I am excited about our design builds. We got a grant from the Dongia Foundation that allow us to have 3 years of design builds, which basically our students are learning to weld and to fabricate and to yes, the last one was an Airstream that was awesome. And it's super excited to know that, you know, to empower our students. That 95% of my student population are female. And most of these students have never worked with a power tool before. And to see the transformation when they are in a design build, it's fascinating, not only for them, but because how they understand how their projects are going to be put together and the language that they acquire because they were part of the design build studios. I am excited with all the collaborations that we are doing within communities in Knoxville and in Nashville, from Alcoholic and AAA. I don't know how to say it. It's always like a difficult word for me to say, for nonprofit organizations, with the Klein Museum at the university. So we are starting to leave the ivory tower of design within, you know, these hypothetical studios, and we're starting to walk the talk with this notion of design as a tool to develop agency and as a tool for change.
So for me, I'm just really excited. I have always been excited about the power of design. And, you know, just listening to Milagros and Igor talking, it amazes me the many different directions and pathways that we can take within interior design. I mean, whatever it is that you're interested in, you can get your feet wet, because again, we're dealing with people. And people come from all walks of life, all sectors, all industries, and those projects that we work on are directly associated with that. So that really is fascinating to me. I'm also really interested and excited about how we begin to see different ways of knowing showing up in projects and showing up in for students, but then also how that transfers into our profession. As we become a more diverse profession, comes with diverse ideas, diverse backgrounds and cultures, and bringing all of that into what we do. So I'm very, very excited to see how our profession and how our projects begin to transform and create a world of belonging for the public.
These are all great responses, and kind of a nice segue into one of our first questions from the audience. It's, as a graduate during the 2008-2009 recession, many of my classmates sought careers outside of design following graduation. As a result of the pandemic and shifts in the industry, do you see current graduates entering the market, or are they also pursuing other opportunities? Milagros, you want to answer that?
Yes, it's a great question. I have been surveying for the last 2 years since I came to UT where my graduating class is. And I am very happy to report that 100% of my students have a job within a month after graduation. 90% of them had a job contract a month before graduation.
Yeah.
So far it looks, I think that still we, I don't know, someone once told me that there are two different types of cycles with the economy and the demand for design. When the economy crashes like in 2008 and 9, private investment goes down, and then public investment goes up to help recover the economy. So we are in the cycle, it's in a very large cycle of private investment that is starting to overlap with the public one because the traditional slowdown in the economy hasn't shown as in previous years. So it's a good time to be a designer.
Yeah, likewise here in Austin, I think one of the, if I track our kind of path from the fearful summer of 2020, and then what unfolded in 21 and then 22, it was astonishing just to see the kind of the boom on the job market. You know, I used to say in 2022, so just last year, that unlike our generation, which kind of has gone through cycles where, you had to take some jobs that maybe were not always your first choice. This cohort from last year was like, well, I have 5 job offers. So, which one do I choose? Which one suits me best? Give me advice about what's the best fit. And, I never experienced that personally. And so I was very, very happy for them. It seems like this year has normalized a little bit. We do our post-graduation surveys published 6 months after graduation. So it should be coming out in November. Anecdotally and informally, I know that our graduates all have jobs. The ones that I've talked to, it's been a good market, but maybe a little bit less extravagant than it seemed to be last year here in Austin and in the region. So, a pretty good outlook for now.
We have another question. It says, much like the workplace, social and work communities have had to shift as things go remote and hybrid. Many of the students you teach have likely never had the experience of a quote unquote traditional workplace. Has it been difficult to reinforce the importance of connection and collaboration within the studio when these students have never had it in kind of that traditional setting?
That's a conversation that happens in the building often. And to me, because I came during COVID, I don't have a baseline for comparison, but very often it's like, oh, the building used to be packed at 2 a.m. in the morning, and now they don't have the culture of. And again, the world has shifted, and I think that in part it's like, how do we adapt to the shift? In part it's also, how do we develop these opportunities to build community and to learn from one another and to establish this notion of the studio is also social learning. You have a peer-to-peer learning. But also, to me, it's very important that they understand that much of the flexibility that they could have in education, they may not have it when they go and work in a firm. So we are running our first pilot study with Gresham Smith in Nashville, where we have a studio that is being taught in their office. Our students travel Monday morning, they are working in the office in their studio project, they work Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they come back the following week. It's all online, and then they go back again. The person from the firm comes to UT, so it's a 3-week, 1 week in Nashville in the firm, 1 week in the university, and week online to let everyone breathe with the driving. And it's fascinating because the students are reporting like, I have to be 8 hours in the office and I have to be the 8 hours working because everyone was working. And I think that it's important for them to know that this is their life post-graduation, right? That post-graduation is not like, I don't know, I go and talk in the phone in the terrace for 20 minutes and come back.
Yeah, I think that this is an evolving situation, so I'm not sure that I can kind of draw generalizations. I will say that our students always collaborate with each other and across programs, so that's kind of built into the curriculum. Maybe as a part of the evolving story, one of the surprises this last year has been we've had studios that I mentioned earlier that were taught by visiting faculty in hybrid mode. And one of the concerns was the kind of desirability of those studios at a time when everyone had kind of moved back to teaching in person. And it turned out that those were actually last fall or last spring, those were the most popular studios. In fact, students preferred having the flexibility to work in the physical studio and then to also communicate and engage online. I mean, this was a little bit scary to try to put together because these studios were kind of making based and materials based, but it was such a discovery that it's possible and also that it's desirable. This semester we have a studio that's taught in hybrid mode, and one of the students just earlier today told me that they interact with the instructor online, but they all show up to studio at the same time. So I think that life is full of surprises, and I think I'm just so happy that we can offer enough of different scenarios that people can kind of find themselves in a way that's productive for them, and I hope that we can continue to do that.
I can't speak to that question per se for the studio environment, but we're seeing something similar in workplace environments. Just as what Igor described, people are really, that's just a tenet of well-being too, or factor of well-being. People really want choice and control. And so we're seeing more and more people wanting to come into the office and work as their projects or schedules or allow them to, or as they need that social connection, but then they also want the option to be able to work from home based on those needs as well.
Those are all wonderful insights. And again, we are kind of right at time. So I thank you all for joining the discussion today, the panelists, and then also the audience. As again, an admirer of you all, I always learn things in conversations with you. So I'm grateful for this time today.